Hey everybody. So, mascots. They're something we've all just kind of gotten used to, but if you think about it, they're kind of bizarre to begin with. I mean, you have a product or a team standing as its own sort of thing, and then you just have, like, an animal or some bizarre construct that's supposed to represent it somehow. It's weird, but mascots are one of those things that are just considered normal, simply because they've been around for so long. Over 100 years, in fact. The term is derived from the 19th century mascot, generally used to refer to a good luck charm or talisman. The first mascots were for sports teams, and strangely enough, for the first few decades of their existence, they were almost entirely actual people or live animals. Except for the Chicago Cubs, who opted instead for this unique fellow, who looks like he would rip your intestines out as soon as you turned your back. Anyway, my point is that mascots have been around for quite a while, and in that time people have come up with some very unique ones. A lot of the most well-known mascots in our modern age are those for food, and there are quite a lot that probably come to mind. They range from ones that make sense but are terrifying, to ones that make sense but are just kind of sad, to ones that make no sense but are also terrifying and somewhat sad. Basically, any way you look at it, you lose. Some of the most infamous food mascots in history have come from none other than McDonald's, and they've cranked out quite a few in the past half-century. Now, there's a lot to be said about McDonald's itself. I'm not even going to get into that here. But you can't deny MCD has had quite a few mascots that have gone down in history for one reason or another, and not always for a good one. Today I'm joined by Ryan, Arthur, and Chris to talk about some of our favorites from the constant stream of recognizable and not so recognizable faces McDonald's has pumped out, for better or for worse. Let's get into it. Now you may not know this, but Ronald McDonald was in fact not McDonald's first mascot. In fact, the chain technically existed for over 23 years before the enigmatic burger clown first made his appearance on local Washington, D.C. television back in '63. So how did the restaurant possibly manage to sell products for 2 decades without Ronnie hawking their wares? Well, as it turns out, he had a predecessor. You see, McDonald's primary selling point throughout the mid-20th century was its legendary Speedy delivery system, which was essentially a fancy term for having customers walk up to a window and having like 4 things on the menu. In order to represent this efficient method of service, McDonald's came up with Speedy. This little dude, who was unfortunate enough to have a burger for a head and was supposed to advertise the expedience of McDonald's, somehow. Although he didn't really do much beside hold up signs and point to random things, Speedy served his purpose pretty well for the time he was used. He remained the mascot for close to 20 years before he was eventually removed in '62 due to a combination of being confused with an Alka-Seltzer mascot and being overshadowed by the now famous McDonald's M. Let me reiterate, this dude got overtaken by an M. Anyway, he wasn't long for this world to begin with, since Ronald's introduction was right around the corner, but he did his job and he will forever be remembered. Godspeed, Speedy. Godspeed.
Ronald McDonald made his first appearance in advertisements and commercials in 1963. He looks drastically different from the loving clown we know today, but he bears a soda cup on his nose and wears a food tray up on his cranium. Originally, Mr. McDonald was based off of Bozo the Clown, whose actor also played the early versions of Ronald. Well, thank the heavens, McDonald's rebranded Idiot Ronald, then officially phased that idiot out of marketing in 2016. My first interaction with this form of Ronald was when I was sleeping in the middle of the night. I wake up and he appears at the end of my bed. He's terrifying. I'm pretty sure he fucked my dog as well. The hamburger patch is a patch of living and talking hamburgers from the 1970s McDonald's show, McDonald's Land. The simple appearance of having a hamburger with beady googly eyes was supposed to make them look very cute and cuddly, but rather made them look lifeless. There's not much information about these characters on the wiki, but it does state a commercial showing of the hamburger patch was shown as evidence as a part of the British McLabel trial. This mascot was used as evidence in a real trial against McDonald's, and the prosecutors made the point how it's not appetizing to children, referring to how in certain episodes Ronald McDonald picks them right off the stem and eats them. In my opinion, the idea of having a television show based off of fast food chain is just preposterous, almost as dumb as making Funko Pops out of chicken nuggets. Wait.
So what is a fry kid? That's probably not a question you've asked yourself at any point in the near past. But it's one I was definitely asking when I saw them on the conveniently organized McDonald's Wiki page for characters. Yes, that exists. Now, some of the fellas on this list, like Speedy, I'd at least heard of, but these things were totally unfamiliar. So, what are they? Well, they're these little pom-pom demons with soulless eyes who are, through some bizarre leaps of logic, meant to advertise French fries. Don't ask me how, I really have no idea. They were originally named the Fry Goblins, were later renamed to Fry Guys, which is the best in my opinion, and finally settled on Fry Kids. They can move around, blink, and overall just create a general sense of unease and terror. They can also break it down like nobody's business, but that's besides the point. How these things managed to survive for a solid 36 years before being phased out in 2008 is completely baffling. But rest assured, they have been put away in the darkest corners of the McDonald's supply closet. At least, I hope. As a side note, there is a page on the McDonald's Wiki called the McGangbang. It's second only to the aforementioned characters article in popularity. I don't know why I included this, I just felt like it needed to be mentioned.
Sunday was Ronald McDonald's pet dog in the late 90s and early noughties, notably as a puppet in the intro to the first 3 direct-to-video tapes of the Wacky Adventures of Ronald McDonald series, until he became a cartoon in the other 3. The McDonald's Wiki describes Sunday as a white-brown spotted creepy dog with a blue nose, a red mouth and a tuft of red hair on his head and tail, who speaks in a dull, monotone voice, making him sound like he's depressed in some way. The use of the word creepy there is inarguably spot on, though they don't really pinpoint the main reason for this in their further description of the character, so I'll give it a go myself. Sunday is a clown dog who has fucking human teeth. Ask your parents for a McDonald's Sunday, kids. Your sleep paralysis demon told you to. So I'm going to start off by talking about Sunday's live action puppet form, as it's his most well known and also most abhorrent. And I use the word abhorrent as it's intended. With a quick Google search you can find pictures of the Sunday puppet that are so morbid that without previous knowledge of the character you'd probably genuinely assume that it was intentionally made to be creepy, like a Halloween prop or something. But no. This is straight up the best thing that the McDonald's design team could come up with for a canine counterpart to Ronald. It's a dog based on a human, so naturally he'd have human teeth, right? I do not understand the thought process behind that, and I swear animatronic or animated animals with human teeth is like a thing around this time period. Getting a bit off topic now, but I recall seeing a co-op advert from 2001 that features CGI bees with full sets of human chompers. Credit where credit's due though, I guess. That dull monotone voice acting that the McDonald's Wiki describes certainly makes the character less awful if you actually watch an episode of the show, which unfortunately in research for this video I've done. I think if he'd shared the kind of goofy voice and attitude that Ronald himself has, the character would have been even worse. Now, funnily enough, the puppet of Sunday wasn't just controlled by some random puppeteer off the street, but was actually portrayed by the late Vern Troyer, best known as Mini-Me in the Austin Powers films. Safe to say this wasn't his finest moment. The puppet moves very awkwardly a lot of the time, especially in the way he walks. It looks incredibly stiff. I'm not a puppeteer in the slightest, but it does look as though that fault lies in the design of the costume and not the way that Troy maneuvers it. While the cartoon version of Sunday is far from a nice looking character, maintaining all the strange clown makeup that just does not belong on a dog, he is slightly less nightmare inducing. That whole idea of semi-CGI, semi-live-action intros to the first 3 episodes of Wacky Adventures are just very uncanny valley all round, but the final 3 are a bit warmer thanks to their fully animated nature. That is, if you can call anything that a company like McDonald's is behind warm. The Wiki also claims that all his appearances besides the Wacky Adventures series were alongside Ronald in various McDonald's commercials throughout the 2000s, this time as a real dog, so presumably not half as strange as the other 2 variants. However, after quite some looking, neither Kieran nor myself could find one of these adverts, and thought it could be a possibility that the writer of the entry had mistaken them for a few adverts from the mid-90s, featuring a Jack Russell called Spot. That being said, the writers on the McDonald's Wiki seem pretty passionate about what they do, so who knows. Oh, and to finish off, since I was originally the one to kickstart the whole Mac Tonight joke between the Blokery crew, I was offered to be the one to talk about him as well. But honestly, that's just too much McDonald's for one day.
Alright, yeah, it looks like it's working. The Professor is a McDonald's mascot that appeared in the commercial Ronald Meets the Professor. In this scene, Ronald meets the Professor in a secret lab. Now, the Professor is a very interesting character. He has a white mustache that wraps around his head and connects to his hair. He wears plaid trousers and a classic fucking coat that's normal that you see in a lab. And the critical feature, I would say, about him is his intelligence. The Professor seems to boast an extremely high intelligence quotient. Not only was the technology that he possessed still being developed at this time, he managed to innovate the field and master it. The Professor created a machine that has the ability to respond to him. It seems sentient, and it's noticeable that it can dip McNuggets. That's its main purpose, but still very impressive. The Professor would most likely have a master's degree in mechanical, electrical, and computer engineering at minimum. Professor also seems to have created this machine by himself, which renders him a mastermind. The Professor was in the commercial in 1988, and he seems like a very ancient McDonald's mascot. You won't hear a lot about him, you won't see a lot about him, and I'm sure if you look him up, there's going to be very few pictures. In fact, most people wouldn't even render him a mascot. He's so minuscule, but he has appeared in one other McDonald's commercial, and I believe that renders him as a mascot. That renders him as a very ancient mascot, and due to him barely sliding over the lines, I think that makes him a strange mascot, a hidden mascot, a rare mascot, and a forgotten mascot. You know, when you think of McDonald's mascots, never think of the Professor. You know, maybe Mac Tonight before the Professor, maybe the Fry Kids, but never the Professor. Yeah. Also, if I get one more goddamn pop-up on my screen, I'm gonna call the Professor to...
Now, forget about all the characters you've heard about so far. Forget the Professor, Speedy, Sunday, and the entire McDonald Land Rogues Gallery. Because in this vast and ever-changing world, there is only one mascot that we really need. And his name is... Picture this. The year is 1986. You're settling down to watch some late-night TV. You're hungry for a dinner of dubious origin and loaded with preservatives, but you just aren't sure where to head. Then, suddenly, in the flickering light of your CRT screen, you see him, rocking a pair of shades and playing a probably copyright-infringing tune on piano. He soars over the skyline on a comically large Big Mac. He comes bearing tidings of good times and great tastes in a far-off land of golden lights. The clock has struck 6:30, and you know exactly where to head. Mac Tonight was created in the mid-'80s to promote McDonald's post-4 p.m. dinner business, promising potential customers a wonderful time if they head down to their local McDonald's after dark. The character was played by Doug Jones of Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy, and Star Trek fame, and boasted a classic and instantly memorable moon-shaped design. The ad campaign was a major success, to such an extent that 1,500 people attended a Los Angeles McDonald's for a chance to see a dude in a suit back in 1987. It seemed Mac was a perfect fit for the chain's dinner specials. Unfortunately though, all good things must come to an end. In 1989, the character was forced into retirement after it was revealed that McDonald's had been using this song illegally, and in the early 2000s, Mac Tonight was, for some strange reason, co-opted into a hate symbol called Moon Man, which further tarnished the reputation of the character. I mean, I'm not even being sarcastic here. I actually thought Mac Tonight was pretty cool, so the fact that a bunch of morons had to go and turn him into a hate symbol is both disgraceful and saddening. But we can always remember him as he was, and hope that somewhere out there, he is still playing his non-licensed song and heading for golden lights. In recent years, McDonald's has dropped virtually every character on this list, with the exception of Big Ronald himself at points, and these grotesque box creatures. Some of these characters may be missed, some not so much. How a fast food chain with such an emphasis on expressionless conformity has managed to unveil such a bizarre and eclectic collection of mascots in years gone by is unknown. Let's be honest, McDonald's really ain't that great. Its mascots are generally nothing more than an ineffective attempt to convince the general public that they have the customer's best interests in mind. It's important not to forget that behind every Ronald and Mac Tonight, there's a soulless megacorporation trying to sell you a hamburger and take you for the proverbial ride. But that doesn't mean we can't enjoy said ride while it lasts. Thanks for watching.